So the case study in 2020 officially started with like an interview process where I determined that Colin was likely a hypophantasic. The amount that he could actually grasp visual details was very, very low. So it was like a low functioning hypophantasic. So after a bunch of interviews, I decided to let him join because why not throw a hypophantasic into the mix? In one of the pre-training questionnaires, he described his current thought life as mostly in words and inner monologue with gestalt ideas of things when I think of the physical world. Low detail, definitely not much 3D or spatial representation. But Colin wasn't always this way. So before losing his ability to visualize, he would often drift off when he was at school into his own imaginative world, and it would get him in trouble. Finally, as an adult, actually right before he worked with me in the study, he finally ran across the topic of aphantasia.
The meme started going around where someone found out that people have internal monologues. And it blew people's minds because a lot of people said, yeah, I have an internal monologue. And then other people were like, well, I see my thoughts. And I was like, what the hell? You know, I thought that like maybe, I don't know if I thought that maybe that's just something that happens to people as they get older or as they grow up, so to speak. But I never really put two and two together. You know, even though I thought it was very strange that like people would talk about counting sheep, and I'm like, what the? Are you just sitting there counting numbers in your head? Like that never really made sense to me. Things like visualization meditations never really made sense to me. Like I was like, oh, okay, so I just tell myself a story. Mm-hmm. So it never really occurred to me until pretty recently that like there was a disconnect.
From his recollection, his mind's eye seems to have been lost around the ages of 8 to 9-ish. I've wondered if this could potentially be a result of the brainwaves solidifying into their beta state, primarily beta state, around that age. Research shows ages 8 to 12, the brain will shift into primarily a beta state. Could have something to do with it.
When we were having sessions, definitely had like visual breakthroughs when like linking my senses, like sense of touch and color and shape together.
Now, pretty much as soon as we started, Colin started to experience breakthroughs as early as session 1, which is absolutely not the norm, but he did. Let me also say, before he met me, he wasn't exactly starting from scratch and that he was practicing some of the things before starting my sessions too. At first, the subtle breakthrough moments like consisted of general idea or like depth and color to the thought. Check out this clip from session 1.
Yeah, so the left side of my desk I built has a server rack in it, essentially. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I could sort of feel the depth of the computer, but also like a sense of color of the lights and brightness of the lights. It was the color mainly and the sense of space and depth that jumped out to me. It wasn't like crazy overwhelming, but it was definitely there.
And then other types of breakthroughs started to occur for Colin as we kept going, like a sense of shape when he was touching a pencil. So these types of visual elements of thoughts were out of his norm for him at the time.
And then up at the top, there's the cone where it's sharpened. And well, actually, I can kind of get like a brief, like really vague image when I touched the cone shape at the top. I'm getting like an interesting mental sort of like, I don't know if I call it visualization, but like a mental idea of the shape of the top of the pencil and like the light color right next to the high contrast of the charcoal at the tip. Getting kind of like a vibe of that like really deep, nice orange color. Yeah, it was, well, like with my eyes closed when I went to feel the tip of the pencil and think about it, it was just like a super low contrast kind of just outlined shape. It was like, think of like a really dark gray on a black background. Mm-hmm. If I close my eyes and think about it now, I can kind of get the idea of the shape of the pencil and like the contrast between the tip and the sharpened part. It's not as strong as it was when I was actually holding and talking about the pencil, but it's definitely still there.
Nice. And this is fairly out of the norm for your kind of normal thought processes?
Yeah, you know, like when I think of things, when I conceptualize things, I know what they look like, but I don't see what they look like. and this is more like seeing, or like more, it has more visual information in it.
And I'd like to show you some more examples of breakthroughs from Colin's sessions. The moments you'll see here are times when the mind's eye or visual information seem to be popping through in his thoughts more than usual. So anything stand out from doing that to you?
I did get like some, like the visual impression of the guy's froey hair and the girl's orange scarf, and I also did get the definite visual impression of like the Super Ball with almost like evil castles coming out of it.
Nice. That's great. That's
Not
really
like not like hyper detailed that I could remember details from, but like the perception of being able to see the idea of that. You know what I mean?
Let's say looking at it with your eyes when it was on the screen is a 10, and then like in the case of an aphantasic mind, when they're only to think of it conceptually, let's say that's a 1.
Okay.
How was the experience of what you're describing there?
Yeah, like between I'd say 3, like a solid 3.
And now this type of thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not super used to accessing this type of thinking?
Not on the regular, no.
What would you say? Is there any clarity at all of what that image was?
It's hard for me to decide whether or not it's exactly like more picture or more list, but there's definitely a picture element to the memory of it. Like I get the perception of being able to see what it is I would be able to try and describe to you. It's pretty good. I'd say it's at least a 5 or 6.
Oh, that's not bad. Yeah.
Probably 4 to 5, because maybe 6, but I'd say solid 5.
Colin was really interesting to work with, actually, because there was these other surrounding phenomena that were happening that he was experiencing that are quite noteworthy. So I'll kind of rapid fire those right now, because I've seen these as through lines with other people as well. Sometimes these things I'm about to mention can happen, it seems, as a result of training the mind's eye. So first of all, dreams. Colin experienced a few times where he had more vivid dreams during the night than normal. I've definitely noticed this as a theme for people in the past too. Another interesting phenomena that I've seen plenty of times before was that when we would first jump on a session and I'd ask him what had changed, at first he would say that nothing had really changed. But then as we were going, right then, there'd be this moment where he went, oh man, I just remembered this moment that happened. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this happen with people. And this is exactly why I encourage everybody to write down any minor change. Because if they don't write it down and commit it to memory, odds are it'll kind of fade as if the moment never even happened in the first place. It's like our default processing that says we can't do something tends to take over and overwrite even our current experience, but also our previous ones too. Another phenomenon that Colin had experienced was the Tetris effect. This started to happen for him particularly late in the sessions. Actually, I think after we finished the 4th session. Now, the Tetris effect could be described as like a borderline prophantasic experience where you actually see a hallucination. They call it that because it was a well-known effect after playing the game Tetris, watching the shapes fall. People will close their eyes and still be able to see the shapes falling in front of them. So each of those phenomena could be considered like a byproduct of training, and I've seen them as through lines through many of the sessions that I do. So overall for Colin, like progress seemed quite steady. And like I mentioned before, progress even seemed to continue after I had finished the sessions, because with Colin and I, there was a gap between session 4 and when we did the final interview that you've seen clips of.
Well, I've had a couple instances since we've finished up the sessions where, like you were saying, the Tetris effect. I was driving around in the country last week and looking at properties out in the country in the woods, and then driving through country roads. And over the next night and into the morning, I had, like, when I closed my eyes, I would have like closed eye visuals of like sunset vistas passing by, or like things outside car windows passing by, trees and forests, just like kind of like scrolling through my head. And then last night I was doing a meditation, and beforehand, for some reason, I saw like a ballet dancer girl, and like could see like her limbs and her movement, and was able to sort of like focus in on it, which is the first, because normally if I have like a glimpse of things, it'll dissipate really quickly.
Mhm.
Like if I pay too much attention to it, it goes away. But this, I was able actually to like concentrate on it for a moment, which was pretty cool.
Specifically going into the final interview, it seemed that visual thought processing for Colin was closer than ever, at least as a norm outside of the momentary breakthrough moments. The breakthroughs for Colin consisted of color, depth, image gestalt, shape, with a healthy sprinkling of the Tetris effect. He also really felt like he left off on a good foot, like he could see a clear path going forward of what he was going to practice and what he was now looking for. And I want to make a note here in terms of my own coaching, because these clips are from 4 years ago. Right? I did this study back in 2020. And listening back, I'm cringing a little bit because some of my coaching it just isn't quite as refined. Because while Colin's breakthrough moments were very noteworthy, they were also kind of subtle sometimes. And then I wasn't doing the best job at like helping him to dissect his own thought process, a process we would call metacognition. Since then, I've actually realized that really one of the main keys out of all of this stuff, of training the mind's eye or whatever you're working on, is metacognition. In other words, dissecting how you are thinking. Because listening back to the sessions too, sometimes this seemed to be a line that I wasn't quite sure how to articulate between prophantasia, what we call prophantasia, versus mind's eye. One is out here, projected in front, of course, one's only in the mind. And I can't help but wonder if somebody like Colin in his position took my sessions now, would he make more progress? Maybe. And we're 2 for 2 for the participants experiencing something new in the sessions. Granted now, their breakthroughs were quite subtle, which isn't entirely uncommon. I think the next important line of inquiry here for myself and my own practice is whether or not these participants' progress was sustained, grown upon, or entirely lost. I would absolutely love to know if any of my old clients from before are watching, or Colin, Bree from the study so far, hit me up, please. I'd love to hear. Also, of course, this is a YouTube video, so after all, if you'd like to support me and what I'm doing, support the channel, like, subscribe, share. That all really helps. And as usual, you can find me in the links in the description, my website, my Discord server. Please jump on in and have a conversation with us. I also linked the original video and the previous video from the case study down in the description too. All right, that's it. 2 more to go. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.